one of my mentors, Taki Moore, talks about, are you selling like broccoli or chocolate covered strawberries, right? And so you have to kind of go like which when you're in the mall walking, right? Like there's never a store that just has like broccoli in the window, but like there is stores that have like chocolate covered strawberries, and people are like, ooh, like so what can you do to bring a little bit of that energy into your offer, into your positioning, to make sure that you're actually going to have a viable business?
Welcome to the Agency Profit Podcast, a show dedicated to going deep space on agency operations, which is just as nerdy as it sounds. I'm your host, Marcel Petitpoff. I'm the CEO of Parakeeto, a firm that helps digital and creative agencies measure and improve their profitability. Join me as I interview some of the smartest thought leaders and agency owners in our space and go deep into operations, metrics, and all the other things you need to get right so you can spend less time worrying about operations and more time executing on your vision.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Agency Profit Podcast. Today, I am joined by a person that I've known for a very long time. I've been a listener of his show for a very long time. He was one of the people that was, really at the forefront of thought leadership in the agency space when I first got into it. And he is the CEO and founder of a company called uGurus, which you might have heard of. He's also the host of the Digital Agency Show and the author of Get Rich in the Deep End. Commit your niche, own your market, and audaciously scale. He's on a mission to help 10,000 agency owners achieve freedom in their business by helping them own their market and really aggressively scale. So with all of that, Brent Weaver, thanks so much for making the time to be here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure. And everyone that's listening to this show will know that we don't like talking about getting new clients on the show. It was one of my theses of this show was like, there's already so much great content out there. We want to talk about the other side of the business, but I've made a few exceptions over the lifespan of the show, and today is one of those for people that I think have a really great way of thinking around this topic. So I'm excited for this limited time, dig into a topic that everybody does struggle with and wants to know more information about on this platform. But before we get into that, in your own words, what do you do and who do you serve?
Yeah, so we serve digital agencies that are looking to attract more leads, win higher value clients, and scale their businesses, achieve more freedom, more income, more free time, so they can do more of what they want, work with who they want, how they want, where they want.
And what led you to start uGurus? What's the backstory there?
So I had a digital agency. The kind of first business I started, I was 17, ran that business for 12 years from my business partner and I in our high school bedroom, right? Just like messing around with websites all the way to a 14-person, pretty successful business, working with clients like Dish Network, Anheuser-Busch InBev, Adobe were some of our marquee clients. And a couple of years before we got acquired, we started to create some videos about how to sell websites and how to, price effectively and how to create proposals. And it gained some traction in the web design market, kind of the web professional market. And started having some really cool stories come back of people whose lives were changed, and they were like so thankful, and they couldn't believe, how much had changed by just learning how to run their business more effectively. And so, at the time when we were looking at potentially exiting or being acquired, we kind of asked ourselves a question of like, well, what would we rather, spend the next 10 years doing? We spent the last 10 years helping hundreds of small and medium businesses and nonprofits. What do we want to spend the next 10 years doing? And we really felt a calling with the web designer market. Eventually, pivoted or tacked a couple of times into the digital agency market over the first couple of years of uGurus, and then we've been focused on the agency market since. So it's been a lot of fun, right? I mean, I think. The agency, I loved it. It was like my MBA in business, right? It was like going into all these, different companies, corporations, nonprofits, like having to go through like literally thousands of discovery meetings, and learning all that there was about those businesses. And I loved it, right? But I think there was something about working within a niche, working with people that I love hanging out with, like. I can't say that about every web design, every website we built. Like, would I invite those people over to have like a barbecue at my house on the weekend? Like, I don't know. Some of them weren't really my speed, right? Whereas in the agency market, I feel like I get to work with a lot of like friends and just cool people, and so it's been a lot of fun. And actually, about a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, I decided to kind of dip my toe in again and co-founded an agency called Unlimited WP with one of the graduates of uGurus, and that's been really cool. So we're up to about 70 people at that agency now, and so getting to, people are like, what would you do differently? And it's like, so I've been able to kind of run that exercise in the real world. And that's been really cool to do as well. So I stayed away from running my own agency for a while, focused purely on the coaching and training business. But that's in a really good place, and helping tons of people, great mentor team, and now we get to do some other stuff.
I love it. You're in the trenches and then reaching directly back to serve your clients in that way. I think that's pretty awesome. So over the years, you have gotten to work with a lot of agencies, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of very similar patterns in terms of what they're struggling with. And before we get to what those patterns are, just for a reference point, when did you start your agency, and then when did you transition to uGurus? Because I have a thesis on how the market has changed in that time, and it sounds like you were kind of on the edges of that transition.
Yeah, so 99 was when our LLC, or the original LLC, was founded. That company went through a couple of rebrands, but ultimately was sold as Hot Press Web in 2012. Kind of rolled up into another agency called Creation Chamber that I think rebranded a couple times. Maybe they're back to Distill. I think Distill is the name of the agency now, but they're still around. They still serve a ton of our clients back in that space. Some of our team are still with that business. So 10 years ago was when we were acquired, and uGurus started 30 days after the close of the agency. So it was, yeah.
What's your framework at a high level for trying to figure out where the focus actually should be for an agency owner?
Well, so, I mean, in terms of like what market to go after, how to gain traction in that market, we use like a 5A framework. It's what's in my book: audience, awareness, attract, authority, and acquire. So very customer first methodology, right? Who's our ideal customer? Let's make sure that overall our strategy is the right fit. And people put a lot of stress on this decision. I'm on kind of my 13th niche. So I tell people, like, it's better to like choose something that seems about right, and get really good at the mechanics of going after a market. And then those mechanics, kind of like somebody who gets good at, like the basic fundamentals of weightlifting, right? It's easy for them to then learn like a new exercise or new routine, right? Because they have that like foundation of strength, and so it's easy for them to then move on to other like more advanced techniques and things like that, right? Or change from like weightlifting into CrossFit, or CrossFit into some kind of cardio or Ironman kind of approach, right? If you're like an athlete, going from one sport to the next is like a lot easier than like a cold start, right? And so audience is just that first thing to get really clear on with within your market, right? Who are they? What are some basic characteristics, right? Is it a vertical? Is it a horizontal? Is there some kind of revenue range, right? Can you give me like 5 bullet points with a Sharpie on a napkin, or if you handed that to me at like a restaurant and said, hey, Brent, great conversation tonight. Can you go and validate this market and see if it's a good fit for me? That I would come in to the office the next day, and I would be able to take those 5 bullets, and I'd be able to execute some basic market research. I could come back and tell you the total addressable market. I could come back and tell you, who the top influencers are. I could come back and tell you the associations. I could tell you the Facebook audience sizes. I could tell you some sample keywords with traffic, right? Like, if you can't do that on an audience, then you're not really clear on your market strategy, right? And it doesn't have to be like crazy, like narrow, where you do it's like, underwater basket weaving producers from, Maine that make, between 10K and 50K a month, right? It's like, it doesn't have to be that crazy, but like if you're not like uncovering a market that's, 5,000 people on the low end to like maybe 50 or 100,000 people or businesses or organizations on the high end, right? Then that could be a problem, right? If you're uncovering a market that's like, I work with SMBs in the United States. It's like, all right, cool. That's like 25 million organizations. I don't know, right? Like you're a freelancer trying to get your first 5 clients, right? Can we get better than that? And so I think from audience, a lot of things get easier, right? Like, where do people hang out that fit this profile, right? What do we talk to them about, right? Those things that if you're not clear on those things, like, what does your website say? Really hard question, right? When you are clear on those things, we can create a cut to the chase sentence in like, 5-10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the first A is audience. And,
Yep.
and that it sounds like that's the first place you start is, do you even know who it is you're trying to talk to about the problem that you're trying to solve for them? Once we have audience validated, what's the next day?
Yeah, awareness is channels. Where do they hang out? Events, associations, influencers, partners, paid ads, content. Where can we get your message in front of folks? And depending on the reality of your business, if you come to me and say, hey, I have $0, I work from home, I have a laptop, I can't travel, right? It's like, all right, cool. Like, let's leverage, some, whether it's, content, partnerships, right? Something where you can contact people and get access to an audience. But if you have money, then I think jumping in and, sponsoring, paying for advertisements, potentially hiring lead gen companies. I'm a little bit funky about hiring agencies when you first start, because I feel like in that traction stage in a market, it's a very entrepreneurial thing. Like it requires that spark. It requires that salesmanship. You need to, and also you learn so much, right? When you get those like first 5 or 10 clients in a market, like every conversation is usually dripping with gold. It's going to help you with your value prop. So that awareness is just like, hey, cool. Can we inventory where our people hang out, right? People that meet this profile. And we might not have great answers in the early days, but every conversation we have with somebody, every email we send, every Google search we make, we'll get more and more clear on, where our people hang out.
I love this one. And from my framework for this is like, there's basically 4 ways to get that awareness. You could pay for it. You can compete for it where people are already searching. You can borrow it from people that already have it. And that's what you and I are doing right now. You're borrowing the attention that I've gathered on the podcast. And that's what I did when I came on your show. I built my entire business on borrowed attention, essentially. I just figure out like who's already got a group of people. Can I go in and add some value? And in return, I get some exposure for that. So I'm a huge fan of that one, especially to your point when cash flow is tight. And then the last one to your point is to basically take the attention. Can we interrupt them in their inbox, on the phone, in their DMs? And all of them I've seen, all of them work. It's just a question of understanding your competency. And in my opinion, try to commit to like one of these so you can figure out what works, because there is going to be some trial and error. It's going to take some time to build momentum. So that is the second A. We have our audience. We know who we're trying to get after. Then we have awareness, figure out how we're going to get in front of them so they know that we exist. Then we go to A number 3. And what's that one, Brett?
Yeah. So attract is the third A. And I also find too, like on the audience and awareness, like a pro tip is if you can find a market champion, somebody who's already established in the niche that you can rely on to kind of introduce you and give you the lay of the land, right? I mean, and I think it can help you make that decision of whether you're going to borrow or whether you're going to take, or where to, if you can get that market insights and get somebody in the niche to kind of help you along, that can really accelerate it. But at the end of the day, like attract is about talking about stuff that your market cares about. So when we went into the business coaching business, like you don't hear me yelling to people like, hey, agency owners, do you want a business coach? Like, oh, this is the best place to get business coaching, right? Like, oh, you want a mastermind? Come here and, do business coaching and mastermind. Like that's essentially like what we do, right? It's like the fundamentals, like we deliver training, we do coaching and mentorship and in community. At some point we'll talk about, what our offer is. But in terms of attracting people to us, it's all about, what's going through our customer's head, right? Our target market struggles with attracting leads, with getting high value clients, right? Struggles with delivering, creating scalable systems, right? It's like those are the topics that they're most interested in. So we spend all of our time, right? 97% of our time talking about that stuff. I'm not out there, trying to convince people to hire us because, they need business coaching. I convince people to hire us because they need more leads, right? And a lot of people in the agency space get stuck in their discipline. They end up talking about SEO a lot. They end up talking about pay-per-click advertising a lot. And I think there's an element of that, right? But it's like, why is somebody investing in, Facebook ads? Why are they investing in a new website? Is it because they just like the way websites look, or are they trying to, get more leads or customers? Are they trying to automate things? Are they trying to, create an application and serve their members in a certain way or their customers, right? And it's like when you spend your time talking about that stuff in the market, all of a sudden, people listen to you. The gentleman I was talking to earlier today, he wanted to sell his clients this thing. And he kept getting on these sales calls and he would say, oh, yeah, this is what I want to sell, right? And they were all like, interesting, but I really don't need that right now. What I need is this. And after 20 of those phone calls, it's like, hey, maybe we should just do the thing that they're asking for and stop trying to work so dang hard, right? Like, why don't we just do the thing that the market keeps telling us that they want, right? And maybe we'll get them a little bit of what they need along the way. And that's the fundamental idea of attract, right? You go out there and talk to your market. What are they actually saying? Are you listening to them? And sometimes it's not maybe what you want, right? Because I've had people who run marketing agencies that go into their niche, like HVAC or something, and they realize that maybe their niche doesn't need more clients, but they need more employees. They have staffing problems, right? And I get people coming back to me and saying, "Oh, nobody's signing up for my services. Nobody in this market needs more leads." And I'm like, "Well, what do they need?" And they're like, "Oh, they need more employees." I'm like, "Well, how do you find new employees?" Well, we probably market, we probably build funnels, right? Like, we probably do all the same stuff, right? So it's like, are you actually listening to your niche? Are you listening to those customers and actually paying attention to them and seeing what they want?
Hey, it's Marcel here, and I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. If you are, then I want to encourage you to check out the Agency Profitability Toolkit. It's a free set of resources that we've put together to help agency owners just like you improve their profitability. It's full of free checklists, templates, and training videos, and has helped thousands of agencies get better at measuring the essentials of their business. So if you want to grab a free copy of that, you can head to parakeeto.com/toolkit or look for a link wherever you're watching or listening to this. With that, I want to thank you again for tuning in, and I'll let you get back to the episode.
And so this is one I want to double click on a little bit, right? I think this is where I'm sure you get this question a lot. It's like, okay, well, what the client, it's like the Henry Ford faster horse thing. The client's asking for a faster horse, but I know that what they really want is a car, or I could deliver them a car. And I'm having trouble getting the client to bridge the gap and understand why our point of view or our methodology is actually going to get them a better outcome. So there's like this client education understanding gap. What's your take on how to reconcile that if this is what we're feeling in a market?
I mean, there is there's like a graveyard of entrepreneurs that had, that solved great problems, right? Or I should say had great solutions, right? That the market just didn't respond to. And I think ultimately you have to look at what do people want? This capitalist economy. It's like dealing with my 5-year-old. Like, if I try to feed him broccoli, I mean, we can all take some bets on what's probably going to happen, right? If I serve him a plate of broccoli, like, is he going to eat it? Like, we all know it's good for him. We all know that he should eat it, or beans or whatever, right? But the reality is like, to get him to eat what he really needs, like, takes quite a lot of theater, right? At least for a while, right? And maybe when he's like 35 years old, he'll be like, oh, I love broccoli, right? It's like, but those first 30 years, right, took a lot of like, let's give him a little bit of what he wants. Let's make sure that he's got a balanced diet. Let's have some strategies and tactics, right? Like, let's divide the plate up into different parts. Let's maybe make it look like a smiley face. Let's turn a game out of it, right? Like, and I'm not trying to treat my potential clients like 5-year-olds, but I think when it comes to human psychology, like, we have to still understand that, like, if a client comes to you and says, I want a website, and your client, and you say, well, you don't need a website. Don't worry about the website. I'm just going to get you more leads. And the guy's like, no, I think I need a website, right? And you're like, no, don't worry about a new website. It's like, you don't need a new website. I'm just going to get you leads, right? And like, that's an example of where, like, you're just going to miss the mark, right? Versus if you're like, hey, cool, like, we're excited to get you that website, but let's also make sure that we, make sure the website is fulfilling your core business objectives and goals. Here's how we're going to help you through that process, right? Like, we have to make sure that we're nudging our clients to get the thing that they need, but not like selling them something that they ultimately aren't going to buy, because that's not going to get your agency or business in any niche, right? It's not going to get you or your client, I think, to a good place. One of my mentors, Taki Moore, talks about, are you selling like broccoli or chocolate covered strawberries, right? And so you have to kind of go like which when you're in the mall walking, right? Like there's never a store that just has like broccoli in the window, but like there is stores that have like chocolate covered strawberries, and people are like, ooh, like so what can you do to bring a little bit of that energy into your offer, into your positioning, to make sure that you're actually going to have a viable business?
Yeah. Yeah, chocolate broccoli. Our mutual friend Dan Martell loves that one. I use it all the time. But it's true, right? Sometimes you have to give people what they want so that you then have the opportunity to give them what they need. But you can't serve a client that doesn't choose to work with you. And so there is some amount of play that has to exist there in the offer. And I think another thing that you touched on, which is really astute, is, the sale where you just kind of list out all the things that you do and you kind of leave it up to your client to figure out how that's going to help them, which when you kind of think about the user experience of that as a client, if they don't understand how or why SEO or a Facebook ad or this optimization to their website's actually going to help them, it's like you're throwing a bunch of puzzle pieces at them and then you're like, hey, you could put it together. But a good sales process and a good kind of attract methodology is teaching them how to draw that line, right? Your outcome objective is this. Let's work backwards and talk about why you might want to take this approach, or why our point of view is that it should be done this way. And that's where the authority tends to come from. And it also helps to lubricate the sale, which I think is important. So
yeah,
I want to make sure we get through the other two A's before you got to jump. So audience awareness, then attract, and really just creating that authority around speaking to that market and talking about the things they're interested in. Then we get to the fourth A.
Yeah, so authority is something that I think ultimately, in a marketplace, it's a little bit of it is gained, especially through like other people telling other people that you're an authority at something, right? Validating you. But at the end of the day, like you've got to put your own crown on, right? You've got to say to your clients, or you got to say to publishers, you have to say to your audience, this is why you should listen to me. This is my some proof points about me, give people the context of who you are, who you help, how you help them. And so if you have, proof points that you can provide in your content, in your pitches, in your proposals, and in every place that you talk to clients, right? And I'm not saying like you get on and like brag. Like I was interviewing some salespeople recently and it was really funky, right? I was like, oh, hey, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. And they just kind of started talking about, like, they just went on for 30 minutes about, all the things that they've accomplished, right? Which isn't super helpful. So having those couple proof points, like, hey, we've worked with, whatever, we've worked with over 35 clients, 35 dental, offices. We've helped them attract over, 450 new patients worth over, $10 million, right? It's like, cool. Like, this isn't your first rodeo, right? Or if you haven't worked in a niche, hey, I've been, designing and building, websites and lead generation engines for a variety of different businesses for the last 5 years. This is my mission. This is my North Star, right? So having those kind of proof points to tell people why they should listen to you. And then also having, some case studies, some relevant examples of work that you completed that somebody can look at and say, oh, that seems like you're legit. And then third-party endorsement. So as you're reaching out to those publishers, partners or whatever, and you produce content together, getting permission to use their brand, use their logo, start putting those things into your proposals, right? Getting your clients that have name recognition, putting those into your proposals, right? I think at the end of the day, like humans are very, like we require trust in order to do business, right? And there's lots of mechanisms of how we identify trust. And so what you want to do is just kind of like pave the way, right? Like put some pedals down on the road to kind of let people know, like, hey, you're cool, like you're to be trusted. You have some signals to them. And it might seem like, oh, do I really have to do that? And it's like, yeah, you probably do, right? You have to make people trust you. And you're either going to come in with, arrogance and feel like you don't need to provide that stuff, or just say, hey, you know what? Let's make sure we got a couple proof points defined. Let's make sure we've got some easy, accessible case studies, testimonials. Let's make sure that we've got some third-party endorsements on our materials, and so people can understand, like, hey, this is an organization that I relate with and that I can trust. And so you have to put that stuff into your marketing collateral, into your sales collateral, and honestly into your delivery collateral, because every one of your team members is constantly selling the organization. And I'm happy to jump back to those. I do know we've got limited time. So acquire, our final A, is really about making sure that we've got the right system and process from our audience to our calendar. And this is where a lot of agencies, it might sound really stupid, but they kind of screw up, right? They go and give a webinar, and then they finish the webinar and somebody asks them, hey, how can we find out more about you? And they go, you can check out my website, and then they just barf the URL or whatever, right? And they haven't thought about what's their offer, what's the valuable thing that they can give to people to make them take action now, and not to go buy a new website, but what's a little nibble, a little nugget, a gift that they can do to acquire that lead? How can they acquire that potential sales qualified lead? And so having a really good immediate offer for a next step at every piece of content, right? So if they're out there writing a blog post, if they're doing a webinar, if they're doing a podcast, what's a little nugget that somebody can engage with in order to get more information, and capture that lead? I've watched dozens, probably hundreds of people give presentations, and at the end of it, they're like, hey, how can we find out more information? And it's just nothing, and it's whoa, we just that was it. That was the opportunity, right? And they're hoping that people are going to go to the website and hunt for a contact page. It's why not just drop your email address? Hey, if anybody here wants a free, audit on their Facebook account, drop me an email. I don't usually do this. I charge for it, blah.com. Right. And so it's making sure that you have that system in place to acquire those leads with every interaction.
This is such an important one, and one that I see people A, not have an offer, or B, it's the offer is just, if you want to buy from me or get on a sales call, or in SaaS, we say it's get a demo, go here, but there's no there's nothing for people who aren't ready to buy yet. No lead magnet, no freebie gift, no if you want a spreadsheet, a template, whatever, more information on the thing we talked about today, you want to go deeper, go find this thing. How the sausage is made, you heard an ad during this podcast for the Agency Profit Toolkit. I'm sure if we go on your podcast, there'll be a lead magnet, a call to action. So I think that's a really important idea there, is have something for the 80% of the listeners that are not actively I need to hire somebody to help me with something, and give them a meaningful way to get more value from you and get on your email list so that you have an opportunity to work them over time. That's a super important one. I see the same thing. So Brent, I know you got to run. Before you do, I want to give you an opportunity to do what we just talked about and tell people where they can go next to go deeper on the content that you create.
Yeah, so you can check out our website, uGurus.com. Tons of tools on there on growing your agency. Because I'm a big fan of this podcast and the show, if you're interested in getting a copy of my book, just shoot me an email, brent@ugurus.com. That's Brent @ugurus.com. It's called Get Rich in the Deep End. I'll mail you out a free copy. Hopefully I don't get bankrupted through that offer today, Marcel. So, but happy to give a free copy, mail out to you guys on this show. So if you want a free copy, just drop me an email. Just say, hey, heard you on the podcast, and we'll hook you up.
It's so meta because we just talked about this, but that was beautifully executed, and it will be in the show notes if you're listening. You want to grab a free copy of Brent's book, I recommend it. So uGurus.com, Brent's email, and his LinkedIn, all in the show notes. Make sure you check that. I'll also leave links to the podcast, which you should definitely subscribe to. So with that, Brent, thank you so much for joining us today, man. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you.